A man walks down a dark street before sunrise with a long stick in his hand. The windows above him are still black. He stops under one of them, lifts the stick, and taps the glass until someone inside moves. Then he goes to the next house and does it again.
That was a real job.
In parts of industrial Britain and Ireland, people paid someone to wake them up. Not with an app, not with a bell on a bedside table, with a human being whose morning work was to make sure other people did not sleep through theirs. Which makes the obvious question less simple than it sounds. How did people wake up before alarm clocks? The easy answer is, they woke up with the sun. Sometimes, yes. If you worked in a field, lived with animals, slept where daylight reached your face, and your day began when the household began moving, sunrise did a lot of work. A rooster helped. So did cold air, creaking doors, someone lighting a fire, a baby crying, a cow waiting to be milked, or a neighbor already hammering something outside. But people did not live in one giant village where everyone gently opened their eyes at dawn. Sailors had watches. Monks had prayer hours. Bakers worked before other people were awake. Servants got up before the family they served. Market traders needed to move goods early. And in winter, sunrise could be late enough to be useless. A rooster is not a clock with feathers. It does not check the schedule and politely ring at 6:30. Roosters have internal rhythms. They react to light, and they are territorial animals. They can crow before dawn, after dawn, and sometimes when nobody asked. If your whole plan was, the rooster will handle it, you had a plan, but not a very precise one. For a long stretch of history, though, precision was not always the point. Many people lived by chunks of time, not minutes. Morning, first light, after the bell, before mass, when the gate opens, when the master calls, when the animals start making noise. A person might not need to know that it was 5:47. They needed to know that the day had started, and they were already behind if everyone else was moving. That sounds small, but it matters. Before cheap personal clocks, time was often public. A church bell could divide the day for a whole town. In monasteries, bells marked prayer hours. In cities, bells, watchmen, opening gates, street noise, and work routines told people where they were in the day. You did not necessarily own the time. You heard it. This made waking up partly social. Someone in the household might be responsible for starting the morning. A servant might wake a master. A parent might wake children. A neighbor going to the same workplace might knock. In crowded housing, one person's morning became everyone else's morning, whether they liked it or not. There is nothing romantic about being woken by boots on a wooden floor and smoke from a stove that refuses to draw properly. Richer people could have servants, better rooms, and eventually clocks. Poorer people often depended on routine, shared noise, and mutual inconvenience. A city at dawn was a machine made of human sounds. Wheels, bells, animals, carts, shutters, coughing, doors, footsteps. Not elegant, useful. Long before the modern alarm clock, people built devices that measured time through things that moved, leaked, burned, or rang. Water clocks, or clepsydra, measured time by the flow of water. Sundials were useless at night, but water did not care whether the sun was up. There were also candle clocks. Mark a candle, burn it, and the passing flame gives you a rough sense of time. In some versions, pins or small metal pieces could be placed in the wax, so that when the candle burned down, the metal dropped onto a plate and made noise. Clever, yes. Also not something you would want to trust next to bedding, because fire is still fire. In parts of East Asia, incense clocks did something similar with scent and slow-burning material. A trail of powdered incense could burn along a prepared path. Different sections could mark periods of time. Some designs could trigger little sounds. Others changed fragrance as time passed. Imagine measuring the night not by blue light from a phone, but by a thin line of smoke moving through a little maze. Fine, but this gets messy. These devices were not all sitting beside ordinary people's beds as everyday alarm clocks. Some were public instruments. Some were luxury objects, Some were religious, scientific, or administrative tools. They show that humans wanted to measure time and sometimes mark a moment with sound, but they do not mean every medieval baker had a reliable bedside alarm. The need became sharper when work became sharper. If your job is tied to daylight and seasons, the environment carries part of the schedule. If your job is tied to a factory shift, a mine, a mill, a train, or a dock, the clock becomes harder. Machines do not wait because your room was cold and the blanket was too good. A factory owner does not want after sunrise. He wants workers when the shift begins. The industrial city turned waking up into an economic problem. Being late could mean losing wages or losing a position. A person could not always afford a reliable alarm clock. Early mechanical clocks existed, but good ones cost money, and cheap ones were not always dependable. Even when alarm clocks became more common, they did not instantly appear in every room like smartphones. So in some places, the solution was a person. The knocker-up, or knocker-upper, was hired to wake clients in the morning. The job is especially associated with industrial towns in Britain and Ireland. A knocker-up might use a long pole to tap on upstairs windows. Some used rattles. One famous version involved shooting dried peas at the glass through a tube. It is a beautifully ridiculous image. Someone standing in the street before dawn, aiming breakfast ammunition at a worker's bedroom window. The important part is that the knocker-up did not just tap once and leave. The job was to make sure the client actually woke. If the person paid to be roused at a certain time, the knocker-up had to keep at it until there was a sign of life, movement, a shout, a face at the window, maybe an irritated wave. Waking people was not a symbolic gesture. It was the service. And yes, the old joke is obvious. Who woke the knocker-up? There probably was no single answer. Some may have been naturally early risers. Some worked unusual hours. Some relied on routine, light, neighbors, or their own devices. The question is funny because it exposes the whole system. Every method of waking eventually rests on something else. The sun, a bell, a body clock, another person, a machine, a habit, or fear of being late. Fear, by the way, is underrated as a historical alarm clock. If missing the morning meant losing a day's pay, people had a strong reason to sleep lightly. That does not mean they always succeeded. It means waking was not just biology. It was pressure. The same pressure exists now when you wake 5 minutes before an important flight alarm, heart already racing, even though the phone has not made a sound yet. Humans do have internal clocks. Circadian rhythms help coordinate sleepiness, alertness, temperature, hormones, and many other processes over roughly a 24-hour cycle. Light is one of the strongest signals. If you sleep and wake at consistent times, your body can begin preparing before you consciously open your eyes. Some people genuinely wake before the alarm because their routine is stable enough for the body to anticipate the morning. Not always, of course. Shift work, stress, illness, alcohol, bad sleep, winter darkness, a crying child, a loud street, and irregular hours can wreck that neat story. The internal clock is useful, but it is not a tiny clockmaker living in your head with a brass bell. It is a biological system nudged by light, behavior, meals, social schedule, and temperature. Give it chaos, and it gives you chaos back. Mechanical alarm clocks change the responsibility. An early personal alarm might ring only at one fixed time, like Levi Hutchins's late 18th century clock in New Hampshire, built to wake him at 4 a.m. Later, adjustable alarm clocks made the idea more flexible. Over time, alarm clocks became cheaper, smaller, louder, and more ordinary. The wake-up call moved from church tower, household routine, street knocker, and servant into a private object beside the bed. That shift matters more than the gadget itself. When a bell in town wakes everyone, time feels shared. When a knocker-up taps your window, waking is a service. When a factory whistle blows, time belongs to the workplace. When an alarm clock sits next to your pillow, failure becomes personal. You set it. You heard it. You hit snooze. You are late. The modern phone is the final strange version of this story. It is more accurate than almost anything ordinary people had in the past. It can run 10 alarms, vibrate under a pillow, sync to a calendar, play gentle birdsong, or scream like a broken smoke detector. And still, people put it across the room because otherwise, their half-asleep hand will silence it without permission. So the world before alarm clocks was not one world. A farmer might wake with light and animals. A monk might wake to bells. A sailor might be shaken for a watch. A servant might be called by another servant. A worker in an industrial town might pay a knocker-up. A scholar or official might use a clock, a candle, water, or incense. The history of waking up is really a history of who controlled the morning. Nature controlled part of it. Then communities controlled more of it. Then churches, factories, employers, and machines took their turn. Finally, the alarm moved into the bedroom and then into the phone. That is why the question feels funny at first and a little uncomfortable by the end. Before alarm clocks, people were woken by sunlight, animals, bells, neighbors, servants, smoke, hunger, work, and sometimes a stranger tapping glass with a stick. Today, most of us are woken by a glowing rectangle we also use for messages, maps, entertainment, banking, arguments, and wasting time at midnight. The old methods were less precise. Some were annoying. Some were unfair. Some were extremely impractical. But they remind us of one thing we barely notice now. Waking up was once connected to the world outside the bed. Now it is often handled by the same device that kept us awake in the first place.
Thanks for watching! If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. See you in the next one!